Chapter 1. The Morning Routine. Arden opened his eyes, adjusting to the dim light flickering through the castle windows. He pushed himself out of bed, his muscles tense. The aroma of the sea lingered around him, offering a moment of peace, although his mind was preoccupied with the tasks he needed to accomplish that day. The thought of his responsibilities as a Heatherwood sorcerer nagged at him as he moved through his usual morning routine. Arden walked across the stone floor, the muffled sound of his boots a regular rhythm in the old corridors. He dressed in his usual clothes, choosing a simple black tunic and trousers. He tied a belt around his waist and put on his old boots, which he had worn for years. Arden always found them comfortable, and they were made from the finest leather Exilia had to offer. Though not fancy, his clothes were of the best quality and fit him well. He ran a hand through his dark hair and pulled it back with a brown leather tie. This simple routine helped him prepare for the day ahead. Looking in the mirror, he saw a man of dignity and strength. The flicker of determination in his eyes mirrored the unwavering loyalty he held for his family and kingdom. Exiting his chambers, he made his way through the labyrinthine corridors of the castle, passing tapestries that depicted ancient battles and legends long past. Each step brought him closer to fulfilling his responsibilities as the oldest son of the Queen and King. Arden headed to the grand dining hall, where he caught the scent of fresh bread and bacon. Higgins, his butler, and Nora, his housekeeper, were there, already busy setting out a delicious breakfast. It was good to see the two of them, and he took his place at the head of the table. "Good morning, my lord," Higgins greeted him with a warm smile as he poured a cup of steaming hot tea. "I trust you slept well?" "Good morning, Lord Arden," Nora chimed in, setting down a platter of golden pancakes along with bacon, scrambled eggs and biscuits. "You look well rested today." Arden returned their smiles. "I did indeed rest well, thank you for asking." After ensuring Arden had what he needed, Higgins and Nora joined him with their own plates. As they ate, they discussed the upcoming day and what tasks needed to be completed. Higgins was more than a butler and usually acted as an advisor to Arden. Nora was Higgins' wife and managed the castle's upkeep and the other servants. They had been in his life for as long as he could remember, always loyal to the royal family. When Arden had relocated from the family palace to Castle Kinblaine several years ago, he was pleased that Higgins and Nora chose to go with him. "Is there anything urgent that I should be aware of?" Arden asked. Higgins nodded, setting down his fork. "The shipment of herbs you requested for healing will arrive this morning. I've ensured that the greenhouse is ready for them." "Excellent," Arden replied. He had ordered the seeds over 2 months ago from the neighbouring kingdom, and was glad to hear that they were finally arriving. Nora spoke up. "I will be coordinating the cleaning of the library this morning. It's been a while since the books were last dusted." Arden continued to eat while listening to Higgins' plans to meet with Gerald, the gardener of the castle grounds. He was glad that he never needed to worry about minor issues such as dusting and planting, especially since he had more pressing concerns. After breakfast, Arden left the castle and made his way to the stables. The smell of hay and the sound of horses greeted him as he entered. The man in charge of the stables, Jonas, the experienced stablemaster, tipped his hat to him as he approached. "Good morning, Lord Arden. How can I assist you today?" "I'm here for my morning ride with Shapira." Jonas smiled. "He's been waiting for you. Go on, he's been restless." Approaching the stall, Arden called out softly, "Hey there, boy." Shapira greeted him with a low whinny, his sleek black coat gleaming under the soft light filtering through the stable windows. He patted the horse's neck affectionately, taking comfort in his steadfast presence. "Are you ready for a run, boy?" he murmured to Shapira, who responded with a gentle nuzzle against his hand. Once mounted on Shapira's broad back, Arden guided him out into the open expanse of his estate. The wind tousled his dark hair as they trotted along the well-trodden paths that crisscrossed his land. His watchful gaze scanned the sprawling fields and dense woodlands that stretched before him, the familiar sights offering a sense of calm amidst the vastness. The rhythm of Shapira's steady gait beneath him soothed his restless thoughts, the bond between them palpable as they journeyed together through the beautiful landscape. Arden loved these moments of peace as he surveyed his land. It was a duty that he had been born to, a duty that was in his very blood, but despite the beauty and tranquility that surrounded him, he couldn't help but feel a little on edge. As Shapira's hooves drummed a soft rhythm on the path through the forest, Arden's thoughts wandered to the place where he had grown up, Galador Palace. Castle Kinblain wasn't far from there, which was also an impressive structure, with its towers reaching up to the sky as if trying to touch the stars. He smiled to himself as he thought of the great halls and the sound of his younger sister's laughter that filled the palace. Arden pictured himself as a young boy, hearing his mother call him to dinner and feeling his father's hands guide his small ones through the motions of a pretend sword fight. He'd had a good childhood, and his parents had taught him all that he needed to embrace his destiny. Now, he felt the weight of that same destiny pressing on his shoulders, wondering if he was really ready for what would be. His parents were the king and queen of Galatore, one of the two kingdoms of Zoralia Island, and they ruled with wisdom and compassion. They had an unwavering commitment to their people, and had the ability to make even the hardest decisions with grace. Beloved by all, they were guardians of a legacy that stretched back through generations. Then, there were his 7 younger sisters, all spirited and clever, each carving out their own path within the kingdom and beyond. Arden's love for his family was as deep as the roots of Galador itself. As he rode through the countryside, he felt a kinship with these lands. Zoralia was a part of him as much as he was a part of the island, yet within this kinship lay a deep responsibility, a duty to protect and serve what had been entrusted to him. This was something he had been taught and trained for his entire life. After an hour of riding, he made his way back to Kinblain Castle. As he dismounted Shapira and led him back to the stables, he kept his eyes on the horizon. Everything looked peaceful, but something just didn't feel right. Once Shapira was settled in his stall, Ardan hurried through the corridors of the castle. He needed to speak with someone he could trust about the change in the winds that he could sense. As he passed by the portraits of his ancestors that lined the walls, he felt their eyes on him. It was a constant reminder of his duties and the legacy he bore. The torches flickered, casting long shadows across the floor as he walked. He found Higgins in his study, engrossed in a stack of papers. "Higgins," he began without preamble, "I must speak with you." Higgins turned, regarding Arden with an upturned brow. "Of course, my lord." Arden crossed his arms, gazing out the window at the green hills sloping toward the sea. "I feel it. Not something obvious, but a certain tension in the air, like a storm on the horizon." He ran a hand through his long, dark hair. A nervous habit stemming from the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. As the eldest son and heir to the head sorcerer's mantle, his fey instincts were finely tuned to detect even the slightest shifts in the magical currents surrounding the kingdom. He turned back to Higgins. "Have you noticed anything strange lately?" Ardent searched the older man's eyes, looking for some reassurance or insight into this foreboding sense of dread creeping over him. Higgins thought for a moment, smoothing out a parchment in front of him as he pondered the question. "I don't think I have, but I've learnt not to disregard your hunches, and they've certainly been right before." He offered a small, reassuring smile. Over the years, Higgins had witnessed firsthand Arden's uncanny ability to perceive threats long before they manifested. Reassured by Higgins' trust, he nodded. "Something is happening outside of the borders of Galatore. I can feel it stirring. I'm not sure what it is exactly, but we need to remain vigilant and keep watching for any signs of disturbance." A small crease formed between his brows as he gazed out the window, the vast expanse of the sea stretching endlessly before him. There was an unsettling energy in the air, like the calm before a storm. "Of course, my lord," Higgins responded dutifully. "I shall keep a watchful eye and attentive ear for any whispers of trouble amongst the staff. For now, you can rest assured that all remains well, at least within the boundaries of your estate." Arden felt a flicker of gratitude for the steadfast presence of his loyal butler. Higgins' words offered a temporary reprieve, reminding him that Kinblain Castle remained strong and orderly under his leadership. Ardan watched pensively as Higgins departed, his footsteps moving quickly down the ancient corridor, fading into silence. Alone with his thoughts, Ardan's unease lingered despite his trusted advisor's reassuring words. Could this disquiet be tied to my impending transition to head sorcerer? Sebastian, the current head sorcerer of the entire island of Zoralia, was getting old. He had just turned 900 a few weeks ago. The people of Galador Kingdom had prepared a celebration in his honor. It had been a grand event of food, dancing, and performances. Just before the evening had ended, Sebastian had pulled Arden aside and said only 3 words. "It is time." Then, before Arden could ask any questions or clarify his thoughts, Sebastian disappeared, as he was wont to do. As the eldest son of the King and Queen of Galador, the oldest kingdom of Zoralia Island, it was Arden's birthright to succeed Sebastian as head sorcerer when the time came. This was his destiny, and he had trained all his life for it. He had passed every test and battle needed to prove he was worthy of this future role. But he hadn't thought it would happen so quickly. He was only 50 years old, after all, far too young to be taking over the head sorcerer's role. Sebastian had been almost 200 years old before he had become the head sorcerer. Arden didn't feel ready, and doubt flickered through his mind as he considered the one remaining task to become head sorcerer, finding his soulmate. According to Zoralian tradition, the head sorcerer must bond with their one true mate, their souls and magic intertwining to protect the island of Zoralia together. Yet Arden resisted this final step. Marriage held no appeal to him. As a boy, he had been content with his solitude when he had the time, finding companionship in nature and magic. Now, as a grown man, the idea of a bonded partner felt like an anchor, diminishing his cherished freedom. But could this reluctance be the source of the foreboding he had felt on his ride with Shapira? Was some mystical force compelling him towards a fate he did not desire? The thought left a bitter taste in his mouth. He chafed at the idea of destiny, forcing his hand in this matter of the heart. It should be his choice. He should be able to marry only when he was ready to make that commitment. And yet the ancient traditions held sway over even one as powerful as he would someday be. To fulfill the role of head sorcerer of Zoralia, he must have a partner beside him. Arden clenched his jaw. Maybe he should seek Sebastian out and express his concerns about the matter before he was forced to live out a life he didn't want. But now, he turned and headed to the secret library located on the top floor of Castle Kimblain. It was home to some of the oldest books and scrolls in existence. The moment he stepped into the library, he waved his hand, magically lighting the numerous candles scattered around the large room. For a moment he stood still, noticing a sacred silence that enveloped the library. He could smell the rich scent of leather and parchment filled with knowledge and ancient magic. The library was circular in shape, its walls lined with towering bookshelves carved from dark oak. Books of every size and time filled the shelves. Some spines had faded colours, showing their age. Others were plated in gold leaf, indicating their importance. Some books whispered tales of forgotten lore and others of spells, with great power. An imposing tapestry hung on a nearby wall that seemed almost alive. It depicted the island of Zoralia's landscape. It featured rocky cliffs against the sea and lush forests that separated the two kingdoms. Galador was on the west side of the island, and Teoth was on the east. A large, serene river ran through the island, providing all the necessary fresh water. In the centre of the room stood a large, ornate table crafted from the same dark oak as the shelves. Its surface was scarred with marks of time and was etched with symbols that represented Zoralia's history. Along the edges of this table sat 6 high-backed chairs upholstered in deep red velvet. Arden headed towards this table, the book he would need to read already there, just as he suspected it would be. He sat down and ran a hand over the embossed leather cover before opening the iron clasp. If he was going to have to follow the old ways, he'd at least know them well before he did. Knowledge was his only defense against whatever was coming. He carefully opened the book, knowing he would be here for a while. He just hoped that the information he needed to learn was in these pages. Chapter 2. Hospitality at Seaside Haven. Kiara stepped out of the taxi and took in a deep breath of the sea air. The town was quaint, with cobblestone streets and small cottages lining the shore. In the harbour, fishing boats swayed gently and seagulls flew overhead. It felt like she had been travelling forever. After arriving in Dublin, she discovered that a small plane had been chartered for her by Mr. Murray, which took her to Rivercrest on the northeast side of Ireland. The moment she arrived in the tiny town, a taxi showed up and she was grateful that all of her travelling needs were being met. Despite the stunning view of the sea, Kiara was exhausted. Jet lag made her feel disoriented and tired. She took a deep breath and tried to shake off the weariness. The bed and breakfast Mr. Murray had reserved for her was a lovely little place. It was a typical Irish cottage nestled along the rocky coastline of River Crest. A creaky wooden sign etched with the name Seaside Haven swayed above the front door. Kiara knocked on the cheerful egg-blue door, which was immediately opened by an older woman with sparkling green eyes, curly silver hair, rosy wrinkled cheeks, and a welcoming smile that revealed a slight gap between her front teeth. "Welcome, you must be Kiara O'Rourke? Come in, come in." Kiara relaxed as she stepped inside, setting her suitcase down beside her. A quick glance revealed a cozy entryway with a nautical theme. "I'm Mauve O'Malley. I hope you are hungry. Let's get you settled in your room, shall we?" Mrs. O'Malley asked in a thick Irish brogue. "That would be nice," Kiara answered. She reached for her suitcase, but the older woman beat her to it, lifting it with ease. "I've got you in room 3. It's our best room, and you will be able to fall asleep to the sound of the sea if you keep your window open." The older woman's tip sounded comforting. "Oh, I can take my—" She stopped talking when Mrs. O'Malley began walking up the stairs with Kiara's suitcase, carrying it like it weighed nothing. "I guess she is used to moving heavy luggage," Kiara thought, with a wry smile, as she followed Mrs. O'Malley up the stairs and into a room on her right. She couldn't help but gasp at the doorway. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through white curtains embroidered with sailboats. The bed frame, made of dark polished wood, was topped with a handmade quilt in shades of greens and blues, covering the thick mattress. A woven fishing net laden with seashells draped across one wall. "The bath is just through that door," Mrs. O'Malley said as she set Kiara's suitcase down near a closet. Kiara smiled with delight at the continued ocean theme, with tiles in swirling wave patterns in the private bathroom. Plush blue towels were folded neatly on a shelf, and a bowl of decorative soaps sat by the sink. "It's beautiful, Mrs. O'Malley," Kiara said. "Oh, call me Mauve," the older woman said with a wave of her hand. "We aren't formal around here. Now, I'll leave you to unpack. When you are done, come down to the kitchen and I'll fix you a nice meal." Kiara didn't have a chance to respond as Mauve disappeared down the stairs. When arriving a few minutes ago, she had wanted to find her room and sleep for the next 12 hours. But the smell of freshly baked bread and beef stew now made her stomach growl, as she realized that it had been hours since she had eaten a meal, and that had been on the plane. Kiara opened her suitcase and took out a few articles of clothing, shaking them in an attempt to get the wrinkles out. She didn't remove everything from her bags since she didn't plan to be here very long. As soon as she met with Mr. Murray, she assumed she'd be heading back to Dublin soon after. Although now that she had gotten her first look at Rivercrest, part of her wanted to stay an extra day or two and do some sightseeing. She made her way down the wooden stairs and paused in an open room filled with overstuffed couches in navy blue. There was a stone fireplace along one wall with sparkling windows on either side. She almost wished it was cold enough to light a fire, since she could already picture herself sitting on one of those couches, a crocheted blanket wrapped around her while she enjoyed a good book. Laughing at her thoughts, she followed the delicious smells to the kitchen. Mauve moved around the large room, clinking pots and humming to herself. The smells coming from the stove made Kiara's stomach growl. Mauve grinned at her and nodded towards a nearby table. "Go ahead and sit, child." The moment Kiara sat in the nearest chair, a steaming bowl of hearty stew was placed in front of her, along with a large slice of bread covered in butter. "This looks fantastic," Kiara remarked as she picked up a spoon. She was grateful for Mauve's kindness and hospitality. "Thank you," she replied. "Now, there is plenty more, so eat as much as you want." Between spoonfuls, Kiara answered Mauve's questions about where she lived and why she was in Rivercrest. "I love this small town, mind you," Mauve said. "But we have few visitors since the city, Sligo, is close by. Most tourists come here for just a taste of Ireland." Kiara paused and wondered what Mauve would say if she knew she was there to find a mysterious island named Zorelia. Instantly deciding that the older woman would think her daft, she only shrugged. "I have always wanted to visit Ireland, and so I thought I'd start on this side and move south," Kiara responded, evading the question. Mauve seemed to take the hint that Kiara didn't want to say more, and instead began sharing stories about the town. After eating 2 bowls of stew and 3 pieces of bread, Kiara's eyes began to drift closed. Oh, look at me. I'm talking your ear off, and you are about ready to fall into what's left of your stew. Go on up to bed now. When you wake up in the morning, I'll prepare you a good Irish breakfast. Grateful for Morv's understanding, Kiara returned to her room. The moment she stepped inside, she only had enough energy to remove her shoes, shirt, and pants before slipping into the comfortable bed, falling asleep the moment her head hit the feather pillow. Hours later, Kiara awoke. The room was pitch black, and it took her a moment to remember where she was. "I'm in Ireland," she whispered into the darkness. Getting up, she used the bathroom's facilities and was ready to return to bed when she remembered Morv's comment about hearing the sea. She opened the window and instantly, the sounds of waves crashing against the shore became a soothing lullaby. She returned to bed and pulled the quilt around her shoulders. Closing her eyes, she tried to go back to sleep, but suddenly she felt wide awake. Her mind was too full of unanswered questions and unresolved mysteries. She hoped the next day would bring answers. Early the next morning, Kiara took a deep breath as she stepped into the classic office building, her footsteps determined against the polished marble floors. Instead of the elevator, she used the stairs to the second floor, where Mr. Murray's office was located. Anticipation and unease churned in her stomach. Stepping into the waiting area, she gave her name to the receptionist. "Mr. Murray is expecting you," the receptionist said after briefly checking her computer, then gestured for Kiara to head through a large mahogany door. Kiara entered the office, taking in the rows of leather-bound law books and framed diplomas adorning the walls. Behind an imposing wooden desk sat an older gentleman with silver hair and owlish spectacles perched on his nose. "Ah, you must be Miss O'Rourke," the man said, rising from his chair and extending a hand in greeting. "I'm Anthony Murray, your late aunt's attorney." Kiara shook his hand. "Please, call me Kiara. It's nice to meet you." Mr. Murray gestured for her to sit in one of the plush leather chairs across from his desk. He asked about her flight and whether she was comfortable at Seaside Haven. Kiara answered, trying not to show her impatience, though she wanted to urge him to get on with things. She clutched her purse in her lap and took a deep breath. "Well, Miss O'Rourke," Mr. Murray began, "as you know, your great-aunt Matilda, or Tilly as she preferred to be called, named you the sole beneficiary in her will after her passing last month." Kiara nodded. "Yes, that was certainly a shock. I never even knew I had a great-aunt Tilly." Mr. Murray folded his hands on top of a manila folder on his desk. "According to her will, she has bequeathed her seaside cottage on Zoralia Island and the entirety of her financial assets to you." "But why me?" Kiara asked, bewildered. "I don't understand why she chose a complete stranger." "I'm afraid I don't have an answer for that," Mr. Murray said apologetically. "Tilly was always rather eccentric and tight-lipped about her personal affairs, but she was adamant that you inherit everything." He slid some papers across the desk towards Kiara. "This is the paperwork to formally accept the inheritance, the cottage deed, bank account information, etc. If you'll just sign here, we can get everything transferred into your name." Kiara reached to pick up a black pen, but then a sense of unease trickled down her spine. "What will it take to sell the cottage? I have no need for a house on a remote island." Mr. Murray removed his glasses, giving Kiara a solemn gaze. "I'm afraid it's not that simple, Miss O'Rourke. Your aunt was quite clear in her instructions. You must travel to Zoralia Island and see the cottage for yourself before making any decisions regarding its fate. You must show me proof that you have been there." Kiara slightly frowned. "But I've never even heard of this Zoralia Island. I've searched everywhere online and it doesn't seem to exist on any maps. How am I supposed to find a phantom island?" "It's no phantom, I assure you," Mr. Murray said cryptically. He opened a desk drawer and withdrew a weathered scroll, passing it to Kiara. She unfurled the parchment, revealing a hand-drawn map of an island, with notes scrawled in spidery script along the margins. "What is this?" Kiara asked, her voice laced with confusion. "Instructions on how to reach Zoralia. I suggest you follow them exactly if you wish to gain access." Kiara studied the map closely but found no familiar landmarks or normal map features. It was a crude drawing of an island surrounded by strange symbols and coordinates along the edges. It all seemed like utter nonsense. "This makes no sense," she insisted in frustration. "How can I get to an island that can't be found on any real maps? What aren't you telling me?" Mr. Murray held up a hand placatingly. Miss O'Rourke, your aunt took great pains to ensure you would inherit her cottage. I have honoured her wishes thus far, but there are certain mysteries surrounding Zoralia that I cannot divulge further. All I ask is that you trust in her instructions and see for yourself what awaits on the island. His cryptic words only deepened Kiara's unease, but she could see he would say no more. Sliding the map into her purse, along with copies of the papers she had just signed, she rose from her chair reluctantly. Very well. I'll pursue this wild goose chase to Zoralia Island. But once I've seen this cottage, I expect full cooperation in selling it. My aunt's whims won't dictate my life. Mr. Murray simply inclined his head. Of course. Safe travels, Miss O'Rourke. And do take care once you reach the island. Zoralia holds many secrets. Kiara suppressed a shiver at his ominous words. This inheritance almost seemed to be more trouble than it was worth, but the mysterious pull to learn more needled at her conscience. She wanted to demand an explanation. What secrets was Mr. Murray talking about? Was she about to put herself in danger? But a glance at the older man told her that he wasn't going to give her any more information. With a polite goodbye, she left the office, map in hand. It seemed a journey to the impossible island of Zoralia lay ahead. The strange directions and cryptic instructions weighed heavily in her purse as she made her way back to the cosy bed and breakfast. Once in her room, she pulled out her laptop and unrolled the weathered map Mr. Murray had given her, determined to make sense of this supposed island of Zoralia. She typed in the coordinates from the map into her search engine, zooming in on the patch of sea it indicated. But only an endless blue ocean appeared on her screen, with no sign of an island. Kiara huffed in annoyance. How could Mr. Murray insist this place was real, when all evidence pointed to the contrary? Leaning back against the pillows, Kiara racked her brain, again trying to recall any family lore about this mysterious aunt. But her father had passed away years ago and rarely spoke of his side of the family. The entire situation seemed absurd. Part of Kiara wanted to walk away from all this strangeness and return home to her quiet, comfortable life and let this phantom inheritance fade away like the island itself. But the mention of money had planted a seed of temptation. She could use the funds to expand her shop and purchase that high-end equipment she'd been eyeing. And hadn't Leah mentioned needing money for textbooks next semester? As much as she hated to admit it, curiosity also gnawed at her. The unexplained pull to see this through nagged at the back of her mind. Everyone seemed adamant that Zoralia existed and that it held some great importance to her aunt. Could there be answers about her family history that she'd never known? Kiara sighed, tilting her head back to stare up at the ceiling. As frustrating as this situation was, she knew she couldn't walk away yet, not when so many unanswered questions remained. She had to discover whatever truth lay hidden beneath all these secrets and strange instructions. Chapter 3. Into the Unknown. The salty tang of sea air invigorated Kira's senses as she made her way down the weathered wooden docks. The marina was close to Seaside Haven, and Mauve had been more than willing to give her directions when she asked where she could rent a boat for the day. She was aware that Mauve thought she was planning on paying for a tour of the area. Kiara hadn't corrected her. She figured she could rent a boat, sail out to where the GPS coordinates on the map indicated the island should be, take a few pictures, and return to Mr. Murray's office with proof that there wasn't an island named Zoralia off the coast of Rivercrest. She'd have this mystery solved by dinner time. Kiara noticed a sign that caught her eye: boat rentals. She had planned to hire someone to take her to the mysterious island, but a niggling feeling of unease made her hesitate. If she didn't even know where the island was, she could only imagine the odd looks and skepticism she might receive. She had sailed before and even had taken lessons when she had been in college. Even though it had been years since she had been on a boat, she felt confident that she could remember the basics, at least long enough to get her to the supposed island, which was supposed to be about 10 miles offshore. Just before she stepped into the boat rental office, she looked at the horizon, almost hoping to see a small island off in the distance. When all she could see was the sea against the blue sky and seabirds flying low over the water, she shook her head and entered the office. She was greeted by a friendly, weathered man who looked as if he had spent most of his life at sea. "How can I help you, miss?" he asked with a warm smile. "I'd like to rent a boat," Kiara said, returning his smile. "I need something that can take me out to about 10 miles offshore." The man's weathered features took on a hint of concern. "Are you planning on heading out that far all alone?" he asked. "I'm not sure that's a good idea." Kiara nodded firmly, hoping to convince this man to let her take one of his boats out on her own. "Yes, I'm quite capable. I've sailed before and feel confident in my abilities." He looked like he wanted to argue, but then he studied her for a long moment. Something must have convinced him that she was trustworthy, and he nodded in agreement. After filling out some paperwork and going through a safety briefing, Kiara found herself standing at the edge of the marina, looking out at the expanse of sparkling blue water. The man showed her 3 boats, and she chose a sleek vessel with white sails that danced in the breeze. He helped her ready the boat, and the moment she stepped aboard, an exhilarating rush filled her veins. She missed sailing and wondered why she had put that interest aside. Promising herself that she would sail more often once she returned home, she prepared to set out into the open sea. Anticipation mingled with the whisper of the wind. Just as she had hoped, knowledge of how to sail quickly came back to her as she guided the boat away from the dock. A feeling of a sense of freedom washed over her as she charted a course to the mysterious island. Less than an hour later, Kiara scanned the horizon as the coordinates indicated she should be close. Instead, all she could see was the endless expanse of ocean and sky. "This is crazy," she muttered, knowing that she had been on a fool's errand. After snapping a few pictures with her phone, she prepared to turn the boat around when suddenly mist appeared before her. It was quite thick, but as she sailed closer, it thinned until it enveloped her and the boat. Tentatively, she reached out towards the strange fog, her fingers passing through it. A warmth spread up her arm despite the chill of the ocean breeze. Driven by curiosity, she guided the boat forward, slicing through the shimmering mist. For a few seconds she couldn't see anything, and panic set in. What was happening? The sun had been shining a moment ago. Then, in an instant, the mist cleared, and the sun beat down from a cloudless sky once again. Kiara shielded her eyes and peered ahead. There, rising from the sea, was an island. She blinked in disbelief. It was as if the island had materialized out of thin air. Steering the boat closer, she took in the rocky cliffs, sandy beaches and rolling green and forested hills dotted with colourful wildflowers. Was this the island of Zoralia? Kiara's logical mind reeled, struggling to make sense of the impossibility unfolding before her eyes. Islands didn't just appear and disappear. There had to be a rational explanation. As she guided the boat toward a small, sheltered cove, questions tumbled through her mind. Was she losing her grip on reality? Had the stress of travelling to Ireland finally pushed her over the edge? The boat bumped against the shore and settled onto the beach. This was real. She glanced behind her, wondering if she should push the boat back into the water. Gathering her resolve, she told herself that since she had come this far, she might as well see the cottage. She stepped off the boat onto the shore, her sandals sinking into the warm, sandy earth. A strange energy seemed to emanate from the ground, tingling up her legs in a way that both unsettled and intrigued her. She paused for a moment, drinking in the sights and sounds. The gentle lapping of the waves mingled with the calls of exotic birds hidden amidst the rocky shoreline. Vibrant wildflowers dotted the grassy landscape. Kiara reached down and plucked a sunny yellow blossom, twirling the delicate petals between her fingertips as she inhaled its sweet fragrance. With a slight shake of her head, she reminded herself of her purpose: find the cottage and gather proof of her visit before returning to Rivercrest. Tucking the flower behind her ear, Kiara secured the boat around a large rock and then set off across the beach, following a narrow path that wound its way up a gently sloping hill. As she climbed higher, the terrain transformed from sandy shores to rolling meadows blanketed in a thick carpet of emerald grass. Kiara couldn't resist the urge to slip off her shoes and wiggle her toes through the lush blades, savouring the coolness against her feet. As Kiara meandered along the winding path, the air seemed to grow thicker with an energy she couldn't quite place. Up ahead, she saw thatch-roof cottages clustered together, surrounded by humble vegetable gardens and livestock pens. But it was the people milling about that truly gave her pause. Their attire was strikingly out of place. The women were clad in simple homespun dresses, their hair modestly covered. while men donned plain linen shirts and breeches. Kiara slowed her pace and slid her shoes back on, eyes wide as she took in the archaic scene before her. Children scampered about, chasing chickens and playing with rudimentary wooden toys. The clanging of a blacksmith's hammer rang out, mingling with the bleating of sheep and the distant lowing of cattle. It was as if she had stumbled upon a medieval village frozen in time, utterly untouched by the modern world she knew. Just like in her dreams, Kiara's logical mind fought to make sense of the impossibility before her eyes. How could an entire community exist in such a bygone era, and on an island that, by all accounts, shouldn't even be here in the first place? Maybe this was a movie set, but there were no cameras or people in modern clothing who would be working behind the scenes. Kiara paused at the edge of the village, her feet rooted to the spot. Once again she felt mixed emotions. One part of her wanted to turn and head back to Rivercrest as fast as the boat could take her, but another part of her felt an inexplicable force, compelling her to move forward and unravel this mystery. As she stood there, debating her decisions, a woman's face broke from the crowd and walked toward her. Her gaze was warm and welcoming. She was about her mother's age, dressed in a simple yet elegantly embroidered light blue dress. Her grey hair was neatly tucked beneath a grey cap. "Welcome, Kiara O'Rourke," the woman greeted her with a melodic lilt. "I've been expecting you." Kiara blinked, taken aback by the woman's words. She was expecting her? How was that possible? How did you know my name?" Kiara finally was able to ask. The woman's keen eyes seemed to read the question swirling in Kiara's mind. A warm smile tugged at the corners of her mouth as she extended a hand in greeting. "I am Anna Clancy, a friend of your great-aunt Tilly. She spoke fondly of you and the day you would come to us." Kiara slightly frowned at the mention of Aunt Tilly's name. How had this aunt she had never met know so much about her? She studied the woman's face, searching for answers or any hint of deception, but found only sincerity in her warm eyes. "Yes, it's nice to meet you, Mrs. Clancy," Kiara murmured. "Please, call me Anna." She reached out and grasped Kiara's hand with her own. At that moment, Kiara felt like their clasped hands formed a bridge between two worlds. Then she shook her head and stepped back, letting her hand fall to her side. She was getting caught up in all this nonsense. Anna didn't seem offended that Kiara had backed away. "Come, child, I'll take you to Tilly's cottage. I'm sure you have many questions and there is much to discuss. We can speak freely there." With a slight incline of her head, Anna turned and made her way along a winding path that led away from the village. Kiara smiled to herself at Anna's use of the word child, knowing that being in her 40s, she was not much younger than Anna herself. She hesitated for a long moment before finding herself following beside Anna. She was full of trepidation, but also driven by a burning desire to uncover the truth of this extraordinary place. As they walked, Kiara took in the sights of the village. She could smell the scent of freshly baked bread drifting from a nearby cottage. The buildings were marked by meticulous craftsmanship. Stone walls weathered by time surrounded one home, while wooden shutters painted in hues of blue and green framed the windows of another. Anna glanced back. "It's not what you expected, is it?" Kiara shook her head. "It's like stepping into another century." "Well, this village, which we call Everfalls, has its own pace," Anna replied with a knowing smile. As they moved further away from the heart of the village, the path grew narrower, flanked by wild flowers and dense foliage. A sense of quiet settled over Kiara, a stark contrast to the bustling village they'd just left. "There it is," Anna said, pointing ahead. Nestled in a small clearing stood a cute cottage. Ivy crept up its stone walls, and it had a tan-thatched roof. The surrounding garden was lush and untamed, filled with herbs and flowers that swayed gently in the breeze. A cobblestone path led to the front door, lined with lavender and rosemary bushes. She instinctively knew that this was Great-Aunt Tilly's cottage. Kiara paused at the gate. This feels different." "This is Tilly's cottage, and now it's yours. Tilly loved her solitude," Anna said fondly. "She found peace here." They walked through the gate, Kiara's eyes taking in every detail. A creaking wooden swing hung on the porch. Window boxes brimming with marigolds and daisies added splashes of colour. She touched one of the flowers gently, feeling an inexplicable connection to this place she had never seen before. As they reached the front door, Anna put her hand into her apron pocket, pulling out a set of old keys. "I've been keeping an eye on it since Tilly passed," she explained, fitting a key into the lock. The door creaked open, revealing a cozy interior bathed in warm golden light. "Thank you," Kiara said as she began to step inside. But before Kiara could fully take in the cottage's charm, a young girl dashed up to them, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She grabbed Anna's sleeve, her eyes wide with urgency. "Miss Anna, it's Mum. She's in labour." Anna's face tightened with concern. She turned to Kiara, clearly torn. "I'm so sorry, Kiara. I need to go. This is important." Kiara nodded quickly. "Of course, go. I'll be fine here." Anna squeezed her hand in gratitude. "I'll be back tomorrow to help you settle in." Kiara watched as Anna hurried off with the girl. She turned her attention back to the cottage, tension swirling in her chest. There was a part of her that knew she should return to the boat, and she glanced at the sun, which dipped lower in the sky. Staying the night felt both foolish and necessary. She instinctively knew there wouldn't be enough time to return to Rivercrest before the sun set. Though a logical part of her screamed to leave, an almost magnetic pull rooted her in place. "Just one night," she whispered to herself. "I'll take some pictures, gather the evidence that Mr. Murray wanted, and then I'm out of here." Chapter 4. Another Visitor. Kiara took a final step inside the cottage and immediately recognized the faint scent of herbs and aged wood, reminding her of her apothecary shop back home and making her feel instantly at ease. She set her bag down near a table and began to explore. The interior was cozy yet rustic, with wooden beams overhead and stone floors underfoot. A fireplace dominated one wall with an iron kettle hanging above it. Shelves lined with old books and jars filled with dried plants made it clear that Tilly had shared her love for herbs. Kiara pulled out her phone and started snapping pictures. Each click of the camera felt like capturing pieces of a mystery she hadn't realized she wanted to solve. The kitchen was quaint, with an old stove and cupboards stocked with ancient-looking pottery. A vase of colourful flowers sat in the middle of the table. She frowned, noting that they looked freshly cut and arranged just a few hours ago. Had Anna known she was on her way? She shrugged, recognizing this as another mystery to be solved, and opened a nearby cupboard. It was bare, with only a few tins of tea and some dried herbs. After searching through the other cupboards, she made a mental note to find provisions if she decided to stay longer than one night. She moved into the small sitting room next. The space felt inviting, with 2 comfortable chairs and a sofa arranged around a low wooden table. Large windows let in ample light, casting a warm glow over the braided rugs and hand-woven quilts that added splashes of colour to the room. Kiara could easily imagine herself curled up here with a book, the sea breeze drifting through the open windows. Her gaze travelled over the numerous knickknacks scattered around the cottage. Small statues of fairies, unicorns, and other mystical creatures adorned shelves and windowsills. Each piece seemed to have been chosen with care, giving the cottage an almost magical feel. Kiara felt an instant connection to these whimsical items. "If I'd met you, Aunt Tilly," she murmured, picking up a delicate fairy figurine, "I think we would have gotten along." She continued her tour upstairs and found 2 bedrooms. Each one was similarly decorated with handmade colourful quilts on wooden bed frames and braided rugs on the floor. The rooms were simple but exuded warmth and personality. One of the rooms had an old rocking chair in the corner, its paint chipped but still sturdy. Kiara entered the small bathroom next. It barely had enough space for a sink, toilet and shower, but it was clean and functional. She returned downstairs, her footsteps quietly treading on the wooden floors. She felt a pang of regret for not having known Aunt Tilly. There was a sense of kindred spirit in this place that made her feel comforted yet melancholic. Back in the sitting room, she sank into one of the armchairs by the window. The sea view stretched out before her, serene and endless. If she kept the cottage, this room would undoubtedly become her sanctuary, a place to unwind after days filled with customers and concoctions. She sat there for a long time before her stomach suddenly growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten anything since the breakfast Mauve had provided that morning. Kiara wandered back into the kitchen, intending to make a pot of tea to help ease her hunger. As she opened the cupboard, she froze. The once empty shelves, which had only held a few tea tins earlier, now brimmed with food. There were jars of preserves, fresh bread, fruits and vegetables neatly arranged as if someone had stocked it moments ago. She noticed a small wooden box that she hadn't seen before. Upon opening it, she gasped at the sight of a quart of milk, butter, eggs and thick slabs of bacon. She put her hand inside and felt that the temperature was cool, as if the food had been stored in a refrigerator. Her eyebrows knit together in confusion. She knew she hadn't imagined an empty cupboard less than an hour before, and hadn't seen this box that seemed to have just appeared. Had she somehow missed all this food? Impossible, she muttered under her breath. Yet, here it was. Pushing aside her doubts, Kiara shrugged and reached for a tin of tea leaves. The scent of chamomile and lavender wafted up as she opened it, calming her frayed nerves. She found a kettle on the stove and filled it with water from the tap before eyeing the wood stove with a frown. She had no idea how to operate a wood stove. Setting the kettle on its surface, she looked around for wood, but didn't see any. Then she noticed some knobs. Carefully turning one, she gasped with delight as a flame appeared under the kettle, despite there being no visible burner. Curiously, she turned off the flame and moved the kettle to another spot. Turning the knob, a flame appeared under it again. It seems as if this stove is magic, Kiara said out loud. As the kettle heated the water, she inspected the stove, looking for wires or any other possible explanation, but eventually shrugged. Perhaps she could ask Anna about it when she returned in the morning. For now, she busied herself by examining the labels on jars and tins in the cupboards. Everything seemed homemade, right down to the neatly handwritten labels. The kettle whistled softly, snapping her back to the present. She poured hot water over the tea leaves in a chipped but charming teapot and let it steep. Moments later, with a steaming cup in hand, she stepped outside and let out a gasp of delight. There was a garden surrounding the cottage that was nothing short of enchanting. Flower beds overflowed with vibrant blooms, roses, daisies, lavender, each one more colourful than the last. Now she knew where the flowers had come from that sat on the kitchen table. Another plot of land held many herb plants, some ready to be harvested, and her fingers itched to cut some. Instead, she turned her attention to two shade trees that stood majestically in the yard, each with an inviting bench nestled beneath its branches. Kiara chose one of them and settled onto the bench, sipping her tea and letting her eyes wander over the picturesque scene. She marvelled at how well kept everything was despite Tilly's passing. It felt like stepping into another world entirely, one where time seemed to move differently. Kiara leaned back against the bench, letting the afternoon sun's warmth seep into her skin. The more she saw of this cottage and its surroundings, the more she found herself falling in love with it. The strange occurrences, the mysterious appearance of food in the pantry, the magic stove, and the timeless feel of the place only added to its allure. Kiara was about to take another sip of her tea when she heard a rustling sound and turned her head, expecting to see a bird or perhaps a squirrel. Instead, a large brown dog trotted into view. His fur was shaggy but clean, and his eyes held a friendly glint. He paused when he saw Kiara, his tail wagging slowly, as if gauging her reaction. "Well, hello there," she said softly, setting her cup on the bench. "Where did you come from?" The dog walked closer. His movements were graceful despite his size. He was the largest dog she had ever been around, almost reaching her waist. He sniffed at her outstretched hand before giving it a gentle lick. Kiara couldn't help but smile. "You must belong to someone around here," she mused, scratching behind his ears. The dog leaned into her touch, clearly enjoying the attention, as much as she was enjoying her tea. The dog then settled at her feet as if he had done so many times. When she stood up to head back inside, the dog followed her closely, almost like a shadow. She paused at the door, looking down at him. "You can't come in," she said gently. "I don't even know who you belong to, and I'm sure your owner will miss you." The dog sat back on his haunches, staring up at her with an expression that seemed almost pleading. His eyes were a soft brown, full of warmth and intelligence. Kiara sighed. "All right, just for a bit," she conceded, pushing the door open wider. The dog trotted in without hesitation, as if it was common for him to do so. Inside, he wandered around the kitchen briefly, before settling on the rug by the fireplace. He looked entirely at home, as if he had taken many naps on that very rug. "Did you belong to Aunt Tilly?" Kiara wondered aloud as she refilled her teacup. The dog lifted his head at the mention of Tilly's name and gave a small bark, but then rested it back down on his paws. She pulled up a chair beside him and sat down, studying him more closely. There was something about him that felt comforting and familiar, as if he had been waiting for her all along. Or as if she had been waiting for him. "All right then," Kiara said with a smile. "You can stay until I figure out where you came from." She figured if he did belong to someone else, they would eventually come looking for him. The dog thumped his tail in approval and closed his eyes contentedly. Chapter 5. The Light and the Candle. Kiara's eyes fluttered closed, her body sinking into the plush mattress as the weight of the day's events pulled her into slumber. The dog snored softly at her feet, providing a comforting presence in the quiet cottage. As her breathing slowed, she felt herself drifting again, slipping into the familiar yet unsettling realm of dreams. In an instant she found herself floating above Zeralia. The island spread out beneath her like a tapestry, every detail sharp and vivid. She could see the quaint village with its cobblestone streets and homespun-clad villagers moving about their daily routines. The sight was eerily reminiscent of the scenes from her previous dreams. A woman in a simple dress knelt by a garden bed, her hands quickly working the soil as she planted seedlings. Nearby, a blacksmith hammered away at a glowing piece of metal, the rhythmic clanging echoing through the air. Children darted past, their laughter light and carefree as they chased each other in an elaborate game of tag. Kiara marveled at the sense of peace and protection that enveloped the village. She spotted a young girl sitting on a low stone wall, her small hands cradling a delicate flower. Kiara approached, her curiosity piqued by the child's serene demeanor. "Hello there," she greeted softly, bending down to be at eye level with the girl. The child didn't react. She continued to examine the flower with unwavering focus, oblivious to Kiara's presence. Kiara reached out a hand, hesitating before resting it on the girl's shoulder. The child remained unresponsive, her eyes fixed on the petals before her. Then she saw him. The man with the long grey beard. He stood at the centre of a clearing, his robes billowing in a breeze Kiara couldn't feel. His eyes were closed in concentration, lips moving as he uttered ancient words that seemed to reverberate through the very fabric of the dream. Kiara's heart pounded as she watched him work his magic. She felt a pull, an urge to understand what was happening. The air around him shimmered with an otherworldly light, casting a soft glow over his figure. Suddenly, a shimmering dome began to descend over Zeralia. It was translucent at first, like a delicate veil being drawn over the island. As it settled into place, the ethereal mist thickened, creating an impenetrable barrier. Kiara watched in awe as the dome enveloped Zeralia completely. The once vibrant and visible island now lay hidden beneath a cloak of enchantment. The mist swirled and shifted, making it impossible to discern any details of what lay beneath. She felt a pang of loss, an inexplicable sorrow as the island vanished from view. Her connection to it felt severed, leaving her with more questions than answers about what she had witnessed. As the last tendrils of mist solidified around the dome, Kiara realized she could no longer see Zeralia at all. It had become invisible, shrouded in mystery and magic. Before she could process this further, the dream began to dissolve around her. The village blurred, then faded, replaced by darkness that pulled her back toward consciousness. Kiara jolted awake, her heart hammering against her chest. The room was dark, the moonlight filtering in through the window. She sat up in bed, pushing the covers aside as she tried to steady her breath. The dog lifted his head from where he'd been sleeping. His warm eyes watched her, and he rested his head on her lap as if to comfort her. She absently ran her fingers through the dog's fur, her mind racing to piece together the fragments of her dream. Like the others, it had felt so real, too real to be dismissed as mere fantasy. The scenes of Zeralia had been vivid, each detail etched into her memory with startling clarity. Her thoughts turned back to the shimmering dome that had descended over the island, hiding it from view. The realization struck her like a bolt of lightning. These dreams were not random. They were glimpses into Zeralia's history. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to process this revelation. Her dreams had always been unsettling, often predicting future events or showing glimpses of possible outcomes, but this was different. These weren't about the future, they were about understanding a past she hadn't known existed. The weight of it all pressed heavily on her. Why had Aunt Tilly chosen her as the heir to this mysterious island? What role was she meant to play in its hidden history? Kiara shook her head, trying to dispel the questions that threatened to overwhelm her. The pieces were beginning to come together. The amulet around her neck hummed with an energy she couldn't ignore. Kiara leaned back against the headboard, staring out at the darkened room. She understood now why Zoralia was invisible. The dome wasn't just a barrier, it was a protection, an ancient magic designed to keep the island hidden from those who might seek to harm it. She had placed the leather book Aunt Tilly had given her on a small table by her bed the evening before, and she now reached for it. A lantern sat on the bedside table, and she reached out to turn it on, remembering how she had spent almost an hour the night before trying to figure out how to operate the old-fashioned light. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened the book. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the delicate script written in an ancient language she couldn't decipher. Her heart pounded with anticipation as she reached the new chapter. The ink looked fresh, the words practically glowing on the page. She leaned closer, her hazel eyes narrowing in concentration. Previously she had been unable to read the chapter because it had been written in Gaelic, but now the words were in English. The chapter described the very scene she had witnessed in her dream. It spoke of a man named Enchanter Sebastian, who had been chosen by the village elders to cast the protective dome over Zoralia. He was described as a powerful sorcerer, revered and trusted by all. Kiara's breath quickened as she read about the soldiers, men who sought to enslave and destroy the villagers because of their paranormal abilities and gifts. The villagers' fear and desperation were palpable in the words before her. They had turned to Sebastian in their darkest hour, placing their faith in his magic to shield them from harm. The dome was depicted just as she had seen it, a shimmering barrier that cloaked Zoralia from prying eyes. Kiara could almost feel the protective energy radiating from the page. The descriptions were so vivid that it felt like she was there, standing beside Sebastian as he wove his enchantment. She ran her fingers over the intricate ink illustrations accompanying the text and depictions of villagers going about their lives in safety. The images brought a sense of familiarity, almost like déjà vu. It was as if she had been part of this world all along, without ever knowing it. After reading this chapter, she wasn't surprised to find that the rest of the book remained inscrutable, written in that same ancient language of Gaelic. Kiara's frustration bubbled up again. She needed to understand everything. But there was also a strange comfort in the possibility that her dreams might continue to reveal Zoralia's history. Kiara closed the book gently, her mind swirling with questions and possibilities. If her dreams were indeed connected to this hidden island's past, then perhaps they held the key to understanding her own role in its future. She placed the book back on her bedside table and let out a deep breath. Glancing at a wind-up clock, which told her it was only 3 a.m, she tried to go back to sleep. But, after a full 5 minutes of tossing and turning, she finally groaned. "I might as well get up," she muttered, swinging the quilt aside. Using the light that streamed through the windows from the full moon, she walked to the kitchen, her bare feet cool against the wooden floor. The dog trailed behind her, his nails clicking softly on the surface. The moment Kiara stepped into the kitchen, a dim light appeared from the ceiling. She stared at it for a moment, trying to figure out how it had turned on. Too tired to figure out this latest mystery, she reached for the kettle and filled it with water before placing it on the stove. Instinctively knowing that Aunt Tilly hadn't stored any coffee, she opened a cupboard and went through the various containers of tea. Her fingers traced the labels, noting Aunt Tilly's meticulous handwriting. It was uncanny how similar their collections were. Kiara felt a strange sense of connection to this woman she'd never met. She selected a jar labelled Calming Blend and unscrewed the lid. The fragrant aroma of chamomile and lavender wafted up, bringing a small smile to her lips. She scooped some into an infuser and set it aside while glancing at the dog, who stayed right next to her, looking up expectantly. "I'm sure you are hungry. What do I feed you?" Kiara wondered out loud. As if the dog understood her words, he walked to a door and then sat down and whined. Kiara stared at him for a moment before opening it. She immediately noticed that this was actually a closet that held buckets, cleaning rags, supplies, and 2 brooms. He immediately began to sniff a canvas bag that sat in a corner. Kiara opened it to reveal brown pellets. "Is this your food?" Kiara teased as the dog whined. There was a cup inside which she filled and then dumped in a likely bowl before placing it before him. "It's weird that your food looks like what I'd buy in a pet store in Boston," Kiara murmured with a shrug. The dog quickly ate what she had given him, so she poured him another cup, which he also polished off. He gave a soft woof and then settled comfortably on a rug in front of the kitchen door. The kettle's whistle broke into her thoughts. She poured the boiling water into a teapot and placed the infuser inside, watching as the water darkened with the release of soothing herbs. After taking a quick sip, Kiara leaned against the counter, taking in the comforting scent that filled the room. Her gaze wandered around the kitchen and landed on a thick white candle sitting in the center of the table next to the bouquet of flowers that still looked freshly cut. The soft glow of candles had always comforted her. She pushed away from the counter and approached the candle, hoping its flickering light might help calm her racing mind. But she needed to light it first. Opening one drawer after another, she rummaged through utensils and odds and ends, searching for matches or a lighter. Nothing. She moved to another set of drawers, pulling them open with increasing urgency but still coming up empty-handed. "Come on," she muttered under her breath, frustration edging into her voice. "I'm sure there are matches somewhere." The dog watched from his spot on the floor, his head cocked to one side as if questioning her sanity. Kiara moved to the cabinets next, hoping she'd find something useful to light the candle. Plates and glasses greeted her instead, neatly stacked but offering no solution. Finally, she let out a sigh and leaned against the counter again. The lack of matches seemed trivial compared to everything else swirling in her mind, but it was just one more frustration on a growing list. Then a thought struck her. It was absurd, really, but desperation and a flicker of playfulness made her entertain it. What if she could light it with her mind? It was ridiculous, but after everything that had happened recently, who knew? Kiara touched the wick gently, her hazel eyes tapering in concentration. "Light and burn bright and true," she whispered under her breath, feeling a surge of energy pulse through her fingertips. She drew back slightly and blew softly on the wick. To her astonishment, the candle suddenly burst into flame, which shot up into the air before quickly settling down to a modest flicker. She gasped and stumbled back a step, her mind struggling to comprehend what? How? The flame danced innocently, casting a warm glow over the kitchen as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Kiara stared in disbelief, her mind racing to make sense of what had just happened. She couldn't have imagined it. The candle had genuinely lit itself. Kiara's heart pounded in her chest as she reached out cautiously toward the candle. The warmth of the flame brushed against her fingers, offering tangible proof of what she'd just witnessed. She sat back down, her tea forgotten as she gazed at the flickering flame. The warmth and light from the candle seemed to pulse with the rhythm of her racing thoughts. The reality of her latent magical abilities began to sink in, filling her with equal parts wonder and fear. How had she done that? Kiara's thoughts tumbled through memories of the past few days, the dreams, the amulet's protective shock at the bar, and now this. The dog crept closer to rest his head on her knee, his gaze unwavering. Kiara reached down to scratch behind his ears, finding solace in his steady presence. "I wish I knew your name, but you saw that too, didn't you?" she whispered, half expecting an answer. "I really did light that candle with my mind." He wagged his tail slightly, his eyes still locked on hers. She glanced back at the candle's flame, still burning steadily on the table. The light flickered gently, casting shadows that danced across the walls. Chapter 6. An unexpected visitor. Arden sat in his study, running his fingers over the intricate carvings on the armrest of his chair. Shadows danced across the polished wooden floor as the fire flickered, but he didn't feel its warmth. He had a lot to think about, and a lot of decisions to make. He gazed out the tall windows where twilight was touching the rolling green hills of Heatherwood. Castle Kinblaine was quiet, a stark contrast to the turmoil in his mind. For a long moment, he watched the last of the light fade in the sky. He was about to send for Higgins when a man suddenly appeared in front of him, seemingly out of nowhere, causing a flock of ravens to take flight into the darkening sky just outside the window, cawing loudly. Arden rose swiftly, muscles tensing until he recognized the familiar figure. Sebastian's face bore an uncharacteristic gravity, his sudden appearance heavy with unspoken urgency. "Enchanter Sebastian, I should have known that you would come," Arden said as he offered a slight bow of respect. "Lord Arden," Sebastian replied with equal respect, stepping forward with customary formality. He leaned in, planting a kiss upon each of Arden's cheeks and then his forehead, a gesture both tender and solemn in Zoralia tradition. Arden studied the older man for a long moment before returning the greeting. He knew his mentor would have the answers he sought, but the usual light-hearted twinkle was absent from Sebastian's blue eyes, replaced by an urgent seriousness that sent a ripple of unease through Arden. The old man took a step back, clasping his hands together around a tall wooden staff he always carried, as if to brace himself against some invisible force. "There is a disturbance," he said, his voice shaking slightly with age. "A shift in the balance of fate that does not bode well for Zoralia." A chill swept through the study, but not from any draught, but from the weight of Sebastian's words. Arden's heart quickened. "I feel it too. What sort of disturbance?" he asked, his voice steady despite the apprehension that tightened its grip around him. Sebastian's deep, searching gaze met his. "It is yet unclear," he admitted with a heavy sigh, "but it is potent enough to ripple through our defences. We can no longer ignore the signs. It is time." Again, those 3 words that Arden knew would change the course of his life. He waved a hand towards a set of comfortable chairs and sofas that sat strategically around the fire. "Please, let us sit." Sebastian removed his grey cloak and draped it over a chair, then leaned his staff against a table. Arden waited until Sebastian made himself comfortable on a sofa before sitting across from him. He knew Sebastian wasn't just guessing that something was wrong. The head sorcerer had ways of knowing things that most could not. Arden leaned forward, the flickering light from the hearth casting a play of shadows and light across his brow. "Have you seen anything in the flames, or in the stars?" Sebastian met Arden's gaze, his eyes as deep and dark as an ancient world. He drew a breath, and it seemed to Arden that the very air waited upon his words. "My visions are hidden," Sebastian confessed, his hands clasped before him as if to hold back the tide of uncertainty. "There are forces at play that even I cannot discern clearly. Time can weave its threads in complex patterns, Arden. Some knowledge must unfold in its own time." Arden straightened, frustration and the urge to act warring within him. "Time may not be a luxury we can afford," he countered. His fingers drummed a silent rhythm on the chair's armrest, echoing the restless beat of his heart. Sebastian's gaze softened, acknowledging Arden's eagerness to defend their kingdom and realm. "Patience is also a form of action," he reminded gently. "Observation can be as powerful as the sword, but there is one matter that cannot wait," Sebastian said firmly. Arden stilled, anticipation coiling within him like a spring. He knew exactly what Sebastian was going to say next. "It is time for you to find your destiny mate," Sebastian continued with an unwavering tone. "The one who will stand by your side and ensure the continuity of Zoralia's leadership." A flicker of insecurity crossed Arden's face, but he quickly hid it. "Destiny mate?" he repeated, a term unfamiliar to him. "Yes," Sebastian affirmed. "Only with your soulmate can you fully access your destiny and maintain balance within our realm. You must take this last step, and then you will be ready to take my place." Suddenly restless, Arden jumped up and looked out of the darkened window. "I must admit, this subject has constantly been on my mind for the last few days. I wish—" "What do you wish, my son?" "I know I must marry soon, but choosing a wife only so I can take your place, under such orchestrated conditions, does not sit well with me." Sebastian's steady footsteps approached. "Arden, the ways of our people are steeped in tradition for good reason." Arden faced his mentor. His stormy grey eyes revealed his inner conflict. "But what about love?" he asked, his heart conflicting with duty. "Am I not to be allowed to marry for love, merely because of tradition?" Sebastian regarded him with a gentle nod, acknowledging the validity of his fears. Love is not absent in our traditions, he said reassuringly. Drawing closer, Sebastian laid a comforting hand on Arden's broad shoulder. I suggest a ceremony, an event where some eligible women from the Galador kingdom can be presented to you. This way, you may choose from among them. It is a time-honored method in selecting a head sorcerer's wife. Arden stiffened at the suggestion. He had heard of such ceremonies before, but the very thought conjured images of wide-eyed maidens paraded before him like prizes to be won. His spirit rebelled against such formality, craving the freedom to find his soulmate, his love, as any other man would. A ceremony? Arden echoed incredulously, his gaze locked with Sebastian's. Lining up women as if selecting the finest horse from our stables? How can one truly measure compatibility or connection in such an environment? Sebastian withdrew his hand and met Arden's gaze squarely. It is not merely about selection, he explained with solemn gravity. It is about connection, the divine spark that occurs when two souls destined to unite come into alignment. And if that spark does not ignite, Arden persisted, his voice laced with skepticism. Then we trust in fate, Sebastian replied confidently. Trust that God will guide you to your destiny mate when and where it is meant to happen. He paused. There is also the amulet. Arden looked at Sebastian for a long moment, even as he clutched the amulet that now hung around his neck under his shirt, one that he had received the day he was born. What role can an amulet play? You could make a requirement that the women who choose to be part of this ceremony make an amulet that represents them. Don't let their beauty and looks be the main factor in your decision. Look at their amulets and allow yours to reveal who is meant to be by your side. Arden grew quiet, thinking about what Sebastian had said. The whole thing seemed a bit old-fashioned, but he could see the value in letting fate take its course, and maybe, just maybe, he would find someone among the candidates with whom he truly could connect. Sebastian held Arden's gaze with unwavering conviction. Your heart will resonate with hers with the help of your amulet, he assured him. When you meet her, your destiny mate, there will be an instant knowing in your heart, a connection that defies explanation and eliminates the need for further searching. An instant knowing, Arden echoed softly, tasting the words on his tongue as if they were a spell that could conjure this fated partner from thin air. Yes, Sebastian affirmed with a nod, trust in this process, just as you trust in your own magic and powers. The warmth of Sebastian's hand seeped through Arden's shirt, spreading a comforting warmth across his chest. What Sebastian said felt true, like a cloak woven from threads of possibility. Trust, he murmured, more to himself than to Sebastian. Trust was not easily given. It was earned through trials and tribulations, through shared experiences and unspoken understandings. Yet here was Sebastian asking him to leap without knowing where he might land, to trust in something as intangible as destiny itself. With another deep breath, Arden squared his shoulders and lifted his chin in silent acquiescence, like a warrior preparing for an unseen battle. If we must go through with this, a determination in his voice, then let's at least make it simple. Sebastian inclined his head slightly, acknowledging Arden's terms. Understated, he added, a softness in his voice that showed his understanding of Arden's discomfort. Yes, Arden said, walking towards Sebastian. We will only invite those from Galador's capital, Heatherwood. It is important that this event does not become overblown. He wanted to keep some form of control over this situation. The last thing he wanted was for hundreds of young women to flock to Heatherwood just to take part in the ceremony, hoping for a slim chance that they might be chosen as the future head sorcerer's wife. Of course, Sebastian agreed, a gentle nod accompanying his words. A modest gathering befits the seriousness of what we seek, a true connection. Arden let out a slow breath, grateful that Sebastian wasn't pushing for a glorified ceremony, but he still felt the weight of his expectations. He walked over to the fireplace and stood in front of it, feeling the heat of the flames on his face, though it did not touch the coldness in his chest. Sebastian joined him by the fire, observing the flicker of hesitation that danced in Arden's eyes. You have my word, he assured him. The ceremony will reflect your wishes, intimate and respectful. Arden nodded slowly, taking solace in Sebastian's promise. He glanced at the fire once more before speaking again. Then let us do this quickly, he said decisively. The sooner it is done, the sooner we can focus on what truly matters, the safety and prosperity of Zoralia. Sebastian's gaze met Arden's with an intensity that spoke volumes. Agreed, he said firmly. We shall arrange it post-haste within the capital. The older sorcerer's eyes softened as he added, and I share your hope that your destiny mate will indeed be present. And if she is not? Ardan voiced the thought that he'd wondered about since his first realization that he needed to marry. What if he couldn't find her? She will be there. Sebastian's words were like a promise. Standing by the fire, Ardian realized that, despite his reservations about traditions and ceremonies, he wanted to find someone who would stand by him, not just as a mate, but as an equal and ally in all things. The connection his mother and father had, the love Higgins and Nora felt for each other, the closeness Sebastian had with his wife for centuries before her death. And so it was decided, an understated ceremony within Heatherwood where fate would have its chance to weave its magic. Chapter 7. Marooned by Magic. Kiara woke to the soft sounds of the village coming to life. She stretched, feeling the warmth of the morning sun streaming through the window. After lighting the candle, she had returned to bed, suddenly feeling very tired. Surprisingly, she had slept well the rest of the night, even though the mattress she lay on was clearly homemade. The fabric was rough and there were a few lumps. She had no idea what it was filled with. She figured it would be better if she didn't know. But the sheets were clean, and the colourful quilt had kept her warm all night, and relieved she hadn't had any more dreams. After dressing in the only change of clothes she had brought with her, a pair of navy jeans and a plaid shirt, she made her way to the kitchen. She paused when her eyes fell on the candle, recalling how she had lit it with whispered words and a breath. Of course, that could have been a dream too. There was a part of her that wondered if she tried again with the candle light on its own. But there was a gentle knock on the door. She opened it to find Anna standing there, a broad smile on her face. "Good morning, Kiara. How was your night?" Anna's eyes sparkled with genuine warmth. "Hello, Anna," Kiara replied, returning her greeting. She wondered what the older woman would say if she described her strange dream, and then how she might have lit a candle without matches. Shaking her head slightly, she stepped aside to let her in. "I've been thinking about the woman in labour yesterday. How is she?" Anna's smile widened as she stepped into the cosy cottage. "Oh, she delivered a healthy baby boy last night. Both mother and child are doing well." "That's great to hear," Kiara responded, returning Anna's smile. The older woman moved to the kitchen table and set down a basket. She began to remove fresh bread and fruit. "I thought you might enjoy some breakfast. It's a tradition here for neighbours to share a meal or two, especially when someone new arrives." Kiara's eyes softened at the gesture. "Thank you, Anna. That's very kind of you." Anna waved her hand dismissively, though her cheeks flushed with pleasure. "It's nothing, really. We take care of each other here." As Kiara poured 2 cups of tea, she couldn't help but notice how natural everything felt despite the strange circumstances that had brought her here. "Do you often have new people come to Zoralia?" Kiara asked, speaking the name of the island aloud for the first time since her arrival. Anna took a seat and accepted a cup of tea with a grateful nod. "Not often, no. But when we do, we make sure they feel welcome." She took a sip and glanced around the room approvingly. "And it looks like you're making yourself quite comfortable." Kiara chuckled softly, taking a seat opposite Anna. "I don't plan on staying." She hesitated, even as she saw a look of disappointment sweep across Anna's face before adding, "But I have to admit that this place, it feels familiar, somehow." Anna's eyes twinkled with understanding as she reached for a piece of bread. "The island has that effect on people. I do hope that you will stay, for a few days, at least." Kiara felt an immediate urge to jump up and run from the cottage at Anna's words. She instinctively knew that whatever the older woman had to say would bring more changes to her life. And she felt she had dealt with enough changes since she first opened the package from Aunt Tilly. She was about ready to voice her thoughts on the matter when a soft woof echoed from outside the cottage. "It sounds like you have a visitor," Anna said with a chuckle. "A large dog appeared yesterday and seemed so at home that I let him stay with me last night. Do you know who he belongs to?" she asked as she opened the kitchen door. The shaggy dog trotted in and nudged her hand with his nose, seeking attention. Anna smiled warmly at the sight. Ah, that's Finn. He's taken quite a liking to you. Finn, Kiara repeated, running her fingers through the dog's thick fur. So, that's his name? Anna nodded. Yes, he belonged to your Aunt Tilly. She always said he had a special connection with her. It seems he's chosen you. Kiara felt a pang of uncertainty. I like him, but I don't think I can take him with me when I leave. She remembered how she had thought about getting a dog, but she also knew it would be almost impossible to take Finn from this island to Boston. Finn leaned into her touch, his eyes meeting hers with an almost human understanding. There was something comforting about his presence that made her feel less alone in this strange place. He seems to have made up his mind about staying with you, Anna said softly. Finn always seemed to know where he's needed most. What kind of dog is he? I believe his breed is called an Irish wolfhound, Anna responded. Kiara was feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, although she felt puzzled by Anna's comment about how Finn knew where he was needed the most. I've always wanted another dog, she admitted, thinking about her childhood pet. But I'm sure the paperwork and red tape would make it difficult to take him to where I live. Anna reached over and placed a reassuring hand on Kiara's arm. Sometimes it's not about fitting them into your life, but allowing them to change it for the better. I'll think about it, Kiara found herself promising. But in the meantime, do you have time to answer some of my questions? Anna's expression softened, though a hint of weariness crept into her eyes. I'm sure that you have questions, and there are certain aspects about this cottage and Zoralia that you should know before you decide about leaving. But, to be honest, I am very tired since I was up most of the night helping with the birth. I really need to rest. I also have a few tasks I need to complete later today. Disappointment flickered in Kiara's eyes. She wanted answers and needed them to make sense of everything. I understand, she said, forcing a smile. I am sure you are tired. What kind of tasks are you doing? Oh, just the usual. Tending to my garden, helping Mrs. Callahan with her weaving, checking on a few neighbours who need some extra help. I'm sorry to keep you from your work. Tell you what, Anna said as she began to gather up the empty breakfast dishes. I promise I'll come by tomorrow and we can sit down for as long as you need. We'll go through everything, Zoralia Island, your Aunt Tilly, anything you want to know. Kiara's heart lightened at Anna's words. I'd appreciate that a lot. Anna nodded, then glanced at the clock on the wall. Well, I should get going so I can stay on schedule. She moved towards the door but paused and looked back at Kiara with a reassuring smile. You'll be okay here? Anna asked. Yes, I'll be fine. I'm sure I will be able to find something to fill my time. A part of her wanted to offer Anna help with her tasks, but before she could do so, Anna stepped out into the sunlight. Take care, Kiara. I'll see you tomorrow. And with that, Anna hurried down the stone path that led to the cobblestone road. Pushing aside her disappointment that her questions would remain unanswered for another day, she shut the door. It didn't take her long to wash the few dishes they'd used, even though she had to do them by hand since there wasn't a dishwasher. However, hot water flowing from the faucet into the sink reassured her that this place wasn't completely behind the times. After putting the last cup away, Kiara realised that she hadn't spoken to her mother Rachel since arriving in Rivercrest. Their last conversation had been a few minutes after her plane landed in Dublin. She pulled out her phone from her back pocket and glanced at the screen, expecting to see a full signal since she had made sure her phone had been totally charged before leaving Rivercrest the day before. Instead, a glaring "no service" message stared back at her. She moved to the window, raising her phone higher in hopes of catching a signal. Nothing. Come on, she muttered under her breath, walking around the room, in a desperate attempt to find even a single bar of reception. But it soon was obvious she wasn't going to be able to call her mother. Confused, she remembered taking a few pictures of the cottage the day before and now tried to find them, scrolling through the photo gallery. But they were missing, seemingly vanished without a trace. She gave a groan, knowing she needed to have those pictures as proof to show her attorney, Mr. Murray, that she had indeed seen the cottage. "This can't be happening," Kiara whispered, her mind twisting in frustration and confusion. She leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. The whole situation felt like something from one of her strange dreams. No signal on her phone. And missing pictures? Kiara felt exasperated and dropped her phone onto the small table beside her. She rubbed her temples, feeling a headache forming from all that was swirling around in her mind. Suddenly she jumped to her feet, knowing exactly what she was going to do. It didn't matter if she had the pictures of the cottage or not, she was leaving. She didn't want to stay another minute on this crazy island. If Mr. Murray refused to let her sell the cottage, it wouldn't matter. She hadn't known about Aunt Tilly a few weeks ago, and her life had been going just fine. Once she returned to Boston, she could move on with her life and forget about this brief trip to Ireland. She grabbed her bag, shoving in the few belongings she'd unpacked. Her movements were frantic, driven by a rising sense of urgency. The amulet around her neck felt heavy, a constant reminder of the mysteries she couldn't solve. She walked to a small desk and went through the drawers to find some paper and a pen, but all she found was parchment paper that looked homemade, a white feather quill, and a bottle of ink. With a frustrated sigh, she sat down at the desk, determined to learn how to use a quill. After a few minutes, she managed to scribble a note to Anna, although her handwriting was very sloppy and there were several ink splotches on the paper. Kiara explained that she needed to return to Rivercrest and planned to take the next plane to Boston as soon as possible. Even though she felt a sudden depth of unease, she signed her name and put the note on the kitchen table, where she was sure Anna would find it. "I'm sorry," she whispered, kneeling down to ruffle Finn's fur one last time, "but I can't stay." Finn tilted his head, his eyes filled with confusion and a hint of betrayal. He stood by the door, blocking her path as if sensing her intention to leave. "You'll be fine. I'm sure Anna will take care of you," she promised, though the words felt hollow even to her. "I need to go home." She rose, took a deep breath and stepped out of the cottage. She closed the door firmly behind her and heard Finn's whine escalate into a series of barks and howls. The sound tore at her heartstrings, but they also fueled her determination to leave. Kiara hurried down the narrow path leading away from the village. Finn's desperate howls echoed in her ears, growing fainter with each step. She pushed forward, focusing on reaching the boat she had rented as quickly as possible. After a slight turn, she continued down a dirt path until her feet began to sink into the soft sand, verifying her arrival at the beach. Scanning the shoreline, she expected to see the small boat bobbing gently on the waves where she had left it. Instead, an expanse of emptiness stretched before her. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum as she rushed forward, eyes darting back and forth, hoping that she had somehow missed it. But there was no sign of the boat. Then panic surged through her veins. "No," she muttered, sprinting up and down the shore. The boat had been right there, she was sure of it. She had tied it securely to a rock before heading into the village. Kiara glanced around wildly as if the boat might miraculously appear by looking hard enough, but all she saw were endless waves and an untouched stretch of beach. "This can't be happening," she whispered, her voice trembling, her hands clenched into fists at her sides as a wave of helplessness washed over her. She thought about the journey back to Rivercrest, about how crucial it was to get back and make sense of everything. The missing boat shattered that plan into pieces. Without it, she was stranded on this mysterious island with no way to reach civilization. Desperation clawed in her throat as Kiara took a deep breath, trying to calm herself and think logically. Maybe someone had moved the boat? Maybe one of the villagers had taken it? There had to be a logical explanation. "Okay," she said aloud, forcing herself to stay calm. "Think, think, think." A sudden movement caught her attention. She turned to see Finn bounding towards her, his large body moving with surprising grace across the sand. He skidded to a halt by her side, his tongue hanging out of his mouth, which made him look like he was smiling with delight at finding her. "Finn," Kiara's voice cracked with disbelief, "how did you get out of the cottage?" She knelt down, burying her face in his fur as tears streamed down her cheeks. She quickly wiped them away, but they continued to come. The dog whined softly, his warm body a comforting presence against her own. Finn nudged her gently with his nose. Kiara wrapped her arms around him tighter. His soft fur absorbed her tears as she clung to him, seeking solace in the only familiar thing left on this bewildering island. "It's just too much," she admitted aloud, though it felt more like a confession to herself than to Finn. "I don't know how to handle all this." Finn responded with another soft whine, as if offering comfort in the only way he knew how. Kiara took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The island might be magical and mysterious, but Finn's presence was real and tangible. She stroked his fur gently, feeling some of the tension ease from her shoulders. Maybe she didn't have all the answers right now, and maybe she never would, but at least she wasn't completely alone. For now, that was enough.